1. Pakistan's debt crisis, spending on weapons while economy suffers. 2. Pakistan's $23 billion foreign debt repayment, what you need to know. 1. Pakistan's debt crisis, spending on weapons while economy suffers. Pakistan is at a critical juncture, grappling with a staggering external debt repayment of $23 billion this fiscal year, even as Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif asserts that the economy is on the verge of a turnaround. The nation's total public debt has skyrocketed to over 76 trillion rupees, with a shocking 46% of the federal budget now allocated solely for servicing this debt. But here's where it gets controversial. Instead of focusing on economic recovery, the military-led establishment in Pakistan is prioritizing multi-billion-dollar defense contracts with countries like China and Turkey. This includes the procurement of advanced missiles, drones, and warships, all while the government is seeking temporary financial assistance from allied nations to stave off a potential default. As the new fiscal year commenced on July 1st, Pakistan faces the daunting task of managing $23 billion in external debt obligations. This figure encompasses repayments to international bondholders, commercial banks, and multilateral institutions. According to the Pakistan Economic Survey 2024-25, the country's total debt reached 76.01 trillion rupees by the end of March, with 51.52 trillion rupees, approximately $180 billion, being domestic debt and 24.49 trillion rupees, $87.4 billion, classified as external debt. The external public debt of $87.4 billion is divided into two main categories: government external debt and loans from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Out of the $23 billion due this year, $12 billion consists of temporary deposits from friendly nations, including Saudi Arabia, $5 billion, China, $4 billion, the UAE, $2 billion, and Qatar, $1 billion, with the expectation that these funds will be rolled over. However, if these rollovers do not materialize, Islamabad will be compelled to pay the entire amount, a burden that its struggling economy cannot bear. Even with these deposits, Pakistan is still obligated to repay around $11 billion this fiscal year to various creditors, including multilateral and bilateral lenders, international bondholders, and commercial banks. Significant upcoming payments include $1.7 billion in bond repayments, $2.3 billion in commercial loans, $2.8 billion to multilateral creditors such as the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, and $1.8 billion in bilateral loan repayments. Despite these financial challenges, the government led by Shehbaz Sharif continues to proclaim an alleged economic turnaround, while the economy remains heavily reliant on international support and is suffocated by debt servicing costs. Debt servicing has now become the largest single expenditure in Pakistan's federal budget. For the fiscal year 2025-26, 8.2 trillion rupees has been earmarked for servicing both domestic and external debt, which constitutes an astonishing 46.7% of the total federal budget of 17.573 trillion rupees. This means that nearly half of every rupee earned by Pakistan is directed toward repaying old loans, leaving little room for essential services such as healthcare, education, or infrastructure development. So, who is responsible for this predicament? A corrupt civil-military nexus has played a significant role in exacerbating Pakistan's debt crisis. This situation has largely stemmed from decades of irresponsible borrowing, widespread corruption, and a military establishment that is unwilling to reduce its substantial budget or relinquish its hold on power. The Pakistan Army, which has long positioned itself as the protector of national security, has been one of the primary beneficiaries of foreign aid and loans. Unfortunately, Funds intended for development have often been redirected to sustain its extensive defense apparatus. Instead of utilizing international loans to enhance economic capacity, both military and civilian governments have diverted resources toward defense spending and patronage politics. The outcome? An economy that has been hollowed out, kept afloat by emergency bailouts from the IMF, loans from China, and deposits from Gulf nations. Even as Pakistan seeks debt rollovers and new financial assistance, it continues to invest heavily in military equipment. Rather than prioritizing economic recovery or social welfare, the government is choosing to acquire more weapons, highlighting a troubling misalignment of priorities. Recently, Islamabad has forged a new strategic partnership with Turkey, focusing on defense collaboration, intelligence sharing, and security arrangements aimed at countering India. This partnership includes a $900 million deal for drone sales to Pakistan and the acquisition of over 700 loitering munitions, alongside ambitious trade targets totaling $5 billion. Additionally, reports have emerged that Pakistan has signed an agreement with China to purchase 40 J-35A stealth fighter jets at a discounted rate. This spending pattern raises eyebrows, especially for a nation teetering on the edge of default. These decisions reflect a state still fixated on military parity with India, even as its citizens grapple with poverty, unemployment, and rising inflation. What happens if these friendly nations decide not to extend their support? The situation could quickly escalate into a full-blown crisis if countries, like Saudi Arabia or China, refuse to roll over their deposits. As the news has cautioned, the situation can worsen if friendly countries refuse to grant rollovers on their deposits, which would make it compulsory for the government to make payments. This scenario is not merely hypothetical. Gulf nations, particularly Saudi Arabia, have increasingly demanded reforms and accountability before providing further assistance. Similarly, China is becoming more cautious, facing its own economic challenges. In conclusion, Pakistan stands at a crossroads, and the choices made in the coming months will have profound implications for its economic future. What do you think? Is the military spending justified in light of the economic crisis, or should the government prioritize social welfare and economic recovery? Share your thoughts in the comments. 2. Pakistan's $23 billion foreign debt repayment. What you need to know. Pakistan faces a staggering $23 billion foreign debt repayment challenge this fiscal year, a financial burden that could reshape its economic future. But here's what most reports don't explain clearly. This isn't just about numbers, it's about survival strategies. The country must repay $11 billion to various lenders, including multilateral institutions, bilateral partners, commercial entities, and bondholders. Additionally, $12 billion comes due in foreign deposits. Let's break this down simply. Saudi Arabia holds $5 billion of these deposits, UAE $2 billion, Qatar $1 billion, and Kuwait $700 million. Notably, China's $4 billion safe deposits appear separately under the Ministry of Finance's books. The repayment calendar hits hard with $500 million due for Eurobonds in September 2025 and another $1 billion in April 2026. Total bond servicing rockets to $1.7 billion when interest is included. Meanwhile, commercial loans require $2.3 billion, multilateral debts $2.8 billion, and bilateral loans $1.8 billion. Here's where it gets controversial. $15 billion falls under public sector obligations, while the state bank carries $9 billion, covering IMF repayments and deposits without Ruby backing for budget support. If rollovers aren't secured, repayment pressure could become crushing. And this is the twist most miss. Pakistan's debt-to-GDP ratio previously looked better due to high inflation artificially boosting nominal GDP. But now, With inflation slowing and nominal growth dropping, that ratio could deteriorate rapidly. So let's debate. Is this repayment strategy a necessary step towards stability or a dangerous gamble that could worsen economic turmoil? What alternative approaches would you propose? Share your perspective below.